Hey guys, hope you're all doing fantastic today. 2022 is over, and we are already getting started with 2023, so that means we need to wrap up my 2022 challenge video. My challenge for last year was to complete 5 games from 10 different genres. So altogether it adds up to 50 games, which is 10 more than I had last year. Unfortunately, with everything that happened this past year with my move and my Disney trip and everything kind of just getting packed away in the last quarter of the year, a lot of things unfortunately got in the way of me finishing this, and I was not able to complete all the games I had listed. Out of the total 50 games, I was able to complete 43, so there were 7 that I did not complete, but I did do more than I did last year, so that I'm actually happy with. I'm also going to be giving all of the games listed a rating of buy, borrow, or pass, depending on how I felt about the game. Obviously, these are all just my opinions, so if you disagree with them or if you have some thoughts on it, let me know in the comment section below and I'll take a look at it. But enough talking about it, let's jump in. The first genre on this list is sandbox games. Sandbox games I have a huge fondness for, just because I love the openness of them. There's no one way to get to the end of the game. They're very spread out. You can take 100 different ways of getting somewhere to get you to that end point, and they're really cool. And a lot of them do include a lot of exploration and crafting along with them, which are some of my all-time favorite things in video games. So for this one, we had Dragon Quest Builders for the PS4, Stranded Sails for the PS4, Astroneer for the PS4, Subnautica for the PS4, and City Skylines for I was going to say PS4, PC. All of these were fantastic games, but unfortunately, this list included 2 that I was not able to complete, and those were Dragon Quest Builders and Stranded Sails. Both of those are fantastic games. In all honesty, I would honestly put buy under all of these games. They're fantastic in every different way. Dragon Quest Builders is a really fun RPG crafting, building take on the Dragon Quest games, and it's a really fun game. The only issue is that they can be kind of long, and unfortunately, it's just one of those games that I didn't get to until later in the year, and it just didn't happen that way, so wasn't able to complete it. The same thing with Stranded Sails. Stranded Sails is an awesome game. I mean, the exploration is there, the crafting is there, the working on your farm, your community as you're stranded on this island is just really fun, and I love that concept. So both of those, unfortunately, were not able to be beat, but they are both buys in my book. Then you have Astroneer, Subnautica, and City Skylines. Astroneer is exploration and crafting in space, and Subnautica is the same thing, but in the ocean. So there you go. And the interesting fact about Subnautica is that I actually have a fear. I forgot what the word is, but it's basically a fear of having like deep unknown, or any of those pictures that you see where you see like those sunken ships or planes in deep water. Absolutely terrify me. I get really nauseous and sick, and I feel like I want to pass out. That actually happened a couple times while playing Subnautica, so lesson learned. It's still a really fun game, and I highly recommend it. And then City Skylines is just fantastic. I grew up being a SimCities 2000 kid, and I enjoyed them ever since. And then later on down the road, SimCity really wasn't cutting it anymore. The games weren't what they used to be. And then City Skylines comes out, and it is absolutely breathtaking. I mean, they have a ton of DLC out for it now, which continues to add to just the overall aspect of the game in every way. And it's just so much fun to sit there and plan out your cities and have these huge infrastructures, and it's just a really fun game. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend all 5 of these games. Coming up next, we have strategy games, and these were really fun. I don't have too many of them, but the ones I did have, I enjoyed thoroughly, except for a couple. We'll get into those. You have Magic 2014 for the PC, Sid Meier's Civilization 6 for the PS4, 1971 Project Helios for the PS4, Monopoly for the PlayStation, and Disgaea 4, A Promise Unforgotten for the PS3. Right off the bat, the 2 that I did not enjoy, 1971 Project Helios for the PS4, and Disgaea 4, A Promise for Unforgotten for the PS3. The reason I didn't enjoy 1971 was because it just didn't have anything to grab my attention. I did a one and done for it. It wasn't bad. It's a game that you would play just to get it over with and hang it up. That's it. I mean, it's a really fun game. If you like turn-based games, it's fun. But there's not a lot to grab your attention and make you replay it over and over again. So this one is going to be a pass for me. Disgaea 4, A Promise Unforgotten for the PS3 is just not my type of game. Not to say it's bad. I mean, you don't have a franchise going for this one for no reason at all. So it does have a big following, and it is a good game for those type of people. Because of that, I'm not going to say pass on it, but I'm going to say borrow it for now. It's not a buy game for me. Like I said, it's just not my type of game. It's a turn-based type game as well, and it wasn't exactly what I was expecting. So because of that, it just wasn't something I really got into. And then you have Magic 2014 and Sid Meier's Civilization 6 and Monopoly. All three of those to me are going to be buys. I'm a huge card fanatic. Like, I wish I could afford a lot more trading card games, but I have to stick to what I can afford, basically, and PC games and games on the PlayStation for Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Pokemon trading card game, either on PC or back on the Game Boy. Those games, I loved them because you had the full amount of the cards at just the tip of your fingertips, and it was amazing. And with Magic 2014, you have that. And obviously there are other Magic games that have come out since then, but this was the first one that got me hooked into it, and I wanted to go through and finish it. I actually really enjoyed it. So if you get into Magic the Gathering, or even don't know anything about it and want to get into it, to me, this is a good one to get into. I highly recommend it. Sid Meier's Civilization is a really fun turn-based game. A lot of strategy going into it. I got hooked. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time with it growing up. Bought it for the PS3. Got extremely hooked. Wanted to get the newest one that was out for the PS4. Got it, and I lost myself in like a 4-hour battle with all the nations. And it was so much fun. I couldn't put the controller down. So I highly recommend picking that up if you haven't already. And Monopoly is just a simple Monopoly game. Everybody knows Monopoly. I am a huge fan of Monopoly. So you can literally get it on any console, and I'm going to enjoy it. Coming up next, we have Shooters. And this one was a very interesting one, to say the least. It had some games in it that really kind of was a tipping point for me in a way. We had Crysis for the PS4, Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising for the PS3, Lost Planet for the PS3, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart for the PS5, and Homefront for the PS3. Unfortunately, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart for the PS5 I was not able to complete just because I got it way too late. It's a really fun game, don't get me wrong. I'm about halfway through it right now, and I will be completing it for this next year, but the time management wasn't there. So unfortunately I wasn't able to complete it, but I still give it a buy it. Crysis was awesome. There is a remake or a remaster that basically came out where all three of them were on one disc, and it was a really fun game to get into, but there were some mechanical limitations with the game that kind of made it frustrating to me. Like, the whole concept of it is the suit and the exoskeleton suit that you have, where its use in the field wasn't all it's cracked up to be. I mean, it was a really cool function of the game. It just, there's some things like with the being able to go invisible or be stealthy. It didn't feel as stealthy as it should have been for that type of game. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with a borrow it. Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising, it's just a standard war game. I really didn't get anything out of it that I disliked or liked. I went through the paces, and I'm like, you know what? It's a good game, and I put it away, and that's it. If you're looking for just a good war game, highly recommend this game. Otherwise, to me, it's just a borrow. Lost Planet, I had really high hopes for, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to go to a pass. And the reason for that is because the aiming mechanism in the game, I could not get used to no matter what. I was just looking forward to getting the game completed and moving on. If you have the cursor on the screen and you move the cursor to aim somewhere else, there's the way it moves is almost like a lag, and it's really weird, and I don't like it. Some of the mechanics of the game needed to be flushed out, and I feel like they were in the later adaptation of the game in Lost Planet 2, but in this one, it wasn't all there. So this one I'm going to have to put as a pass. Homefront on the PS3 was a very interesting game, to say the least, and I'll tell you right now, it's going to be the hardest pass I will give you out of this entire list. Reason being is that you can have a war game, and yes, they are going to have tensions in the game that may be politically charged or religiously charged or racially charged, depending on where the battle is taking place. And I understand that. That's war. It's an unfortunate effect of war, and it's understandable to an extent because of the situation that's happening. With this game, I feel like there are games that handle it very well. This game, I don't believe it did. I mean, there was even a point where I had to be like, whoa, like, I was a little uncomfortable with that. I gotta move on. Like, I was a little unsettled. Not to mention, this game bugged out on me and froze my PS3 maybe 24 times. The game's extremely buggy. It's going to be the hardest pass out of this entire list, guaranteed. Now, role-playing games. They are, without a doubt, my most favorite genre of all time, especially when they're deep, customizable, and chock full of exploration. There's just so much to go into the game. There's so much folklore to build on, so much story, so much character development. I love those type of RPGs. And I feel like I got that with all of these RPGs in at least some way, shape, or form. Those games were Diablo 3, Reaper of Souls for the PS4, God of War Ragnarok for the PS5, Cat Quest for the PS4, Pokemon Diamond for Switch, and Pokemon Pearl for Switch. Obviously, those are the remakes. Now, the reason I put both those Pokemon games separately is because of the in-game exclusives for each Pokemon. Some of the Pokemon I used in Diamond I couldn't use in Pearl, and I had to use some of them in Pearl that I couldn't use in Diamond. Therefore, to me, they were two separate games. Both of those games, they're a little bit too cutesy for me as far as Pokemon games go, but I felt like the games were done well, and I would put those as buys. I found them extremely fun, and I'm still playing them. Next up is going to be Cat Quest, and I absolutely love that game. That was a huge diamond in the rough. Didn't know anything about it until I bought it. It's the most adorable game I've ever played. It's an RPG with cats. Like, I mean, the weapons, how they talk in the game, it's very cute, it's very cattish. That's all I need to say about it. Just buy. That's an automatic buy for me. And it's not that expensive of a game. And with the physical copy that I got, it actually comes with both 1 and 2. So there you go. Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls was fantastic. I grew up a Diablo fan. I had the battle chest. I had a lot of fun with this one. It was the expansion to Diablo 3, but it came with the full game, and it was just so much fun to play, so much fun to build my character. I gotta go with a paladin. That's just my style. I like it. Beefy, tanky, got weapons, got healing, just a powerhouse of a player. Absolutely love it. So that one is going to get a hard buy from me. And last up, we have God of War Ragnarok on the PS5. I can guarantee you this will be the most significant 100% buy on this entire list. How Homefront was the worst game on this list, Ragnarok will definitely be the best one out of this entire listing, just because of how amazing this game was. Even if you're not a fan of PlayStation, I highly recommend watching videos on this and learning the story of Kratos from beginning to this. And it's just amazing, and it's beautiful. The way it ended was stunning. The character development of both him and his son throughout the whole journey they've had in the last game and Ragnarok, and just seeing everything unfold in front of you. In all honesty, I just can't give this game enough praise in this short amount of time. So highly recommend to check it out, and definitely at least borrow it, but I would definitely put a buy on it. Coming up next, we have simulation games, and I have to be honest with you, this was the hardest genre to come up with games for, just primarily because any of the games I did have for simulation, they're far and few between to begin with, and I already finished them. So a few of them I had to go and buy them, and I don't really have a whole lot of simulation games to begin with. So it made me realize that moving forward with gaming, maybe I should take a little dab into more simulation games rather than just a chock full of RPGs and sandbox and sports games. Maybe kind of get into more of the simulation games because they were very fun. I just don't have a lot of them. We had My Time at Porsche for the PS4, Mini Motorways for the PC, Lawn Mowing Simulator for the PS5. Believe me, that's a good game. And Brewmaster Beer Brewing Simulator for the PC, and Real Fishing Road Trip Adventure for the PS4. Unfortunately, this was also a genre where I was not able to complete all of the games, with Lawn Mowing Simulator for the PS5 and Brewmaster Beer Brewing Simulator for the PC. Both of those are fantastic games, and it surprised me how realistic those games are, like how in-depth. I accidentally ran over a couple flowers, and I got deducted money in mowing lawn, and I wasn't paying attention. Apparently, I turned the lawnmower too many times in a single spot, and I tore up the grass. I'm like, holy cow, that's something that actually happens. So, you know what? Kudos to the game makers who made that game, and seeing just how realistic and how in-depth they got in it, they cared so much about the game, and it really comes through. And then with the beer brewing simulator, holy cow, was that thorough. Like, you actually have to walk around the kitchen, grab your stuff, you actually have to have the proper measurements putting into the pot, brewing your craft brew, your IPA, and make, or wine, or whatever it is that you're making. And then once it's perfected, you need to bottle it up, make a label, make a name for it, sell it, and profit. Like, there's a whole fundamental process to that game, and holy cow, is it in depth. Highly recommend both of those games if you want something that's far more realistic than probably what it should be, and it makes it so much fun. Both of those are a buy. Real Fishing Road Trip Adventure for the PS4 was a huge bummer for me. That one, right off the bat, is going to be a pass. I grew up with real fishing games on the PlayStation, with my first one being on the PlayStation 1, and then you had Real Fishing 2 and 3. And I had hundreds of hours into Real Fishing on the PS1, just because that's a game that, it was one of the first PlayStation games I ever played, and I absolutely loved it. It was very relaxing to me, even though it wasn't very in-depth. I mean, obviously it's a PS1 game, so it's not going to be, but it had enough to keep me in it. And getting to this one, I wanted to try it. I'm like, okay, it's got Real Fishing, it's made by the same company. No, they cutified it with anime, which I have nothing against anime. I love anime. But you took a realistic-ish fishing game and made it into a cutesy little anime. And it's a very different take on the game, and not something I agreed with. So this one's going to be a hard pass. Mini Motorways for the PC is a very addicting game right off the bat, and I had a blast playing it, got hooked. It's very fun, very easy to just sit down and play, and you can find yourself getting lost in it for hours. You're basically building roadways for your workers to get from point A to point B. You got to do it in the most effective way possible, and over time there's going to be so many roadways and so many intersections, and you need to manage those and make sure everything flows without stuff going wrong. And it actually got really fun towards I want to say like the halfway point in it, when I really got in a groove, and it was just really cool. So I highly recommend that game. I can see a lot of people not really getting into it for the long term. So as much as I want to give this game a buy, I'm going to have to go with a borrow, just because I don't really think it's got hundreds of hours worth of playability for just a regular person. And then rounding out the list, we have My Time at Portia, which isn't a bad game. I just didn't really feel myself getting grabbed into it. I mean, taken for a ride with this game, you know? So I'm going to have to give it a borrow. Even though I know some people really love the game, they think it's really cool, I just really couldn't get into it. It was really fun. I love the crafting of it. I love the exploring. I love talking to all the townspeople in it and just building on the character and whatnot. But I don't know, it just wasn't my cup of tea. So I'm going to have to give it a borrow. Jumping into the sports genre, this one I have a lot of fun with. I actually find it very therapeutic to watch and play sports. So I can sit down and watch or play any kind of a sports show or movie or game for this matter, and just be totally content with it. And the same goes for all of these games. You had Gran Turismo 7 for the PS5, Team Sonic Racing for the PS4, Madden 20 for the PS4, Ride 2 for the PS4, and NHL 08 for the PS3. Gran Turismo 7 to me is very nostalgic, just because I grew up with the Gran Turismo series, so this one's not new. It's just very nice to get into basically what I consider the grandfather of what we have nowadays as far as racing games are concerned. So this one is a definite buy. The soundtrack, the mechanics, how the cars handle, how they respond with the controller, it's fantastic. It's an extremely realistic style of racing game, and you can't go wrong with it. Definite buy. And then you have Team Sonic Racing, which is the polar opposite of Gran Turismo, where you have a much more fun, relaxed version of racing. So if you unfortunately can't get like a Mario Kart game, but you have some kids, you want to play a nice, just downbeat game with your friends or family, definitely go with Team Sonic Racing. It's a good buy. I enjoyed the mechanics of the game, the detail with all the characters, and just how many challenges and how high the playability is with this game overall. It was a fantastic game, and you can't go wrong with it. And then getting into Madden 20, that is a buy for sure, but it doesn't have to be this particular Madden. let's be honest here, all Madden games that are relatively newer, I would say from 2013, 14, 15 on up, you're going to find a lot of similarities with them. A lot of the controls are identical. Nothing's really changed that much. I mean, you really can't change the art of football per se in that way. But if you get any Madden game, you're definitely going to have a good time with it, so it is a buy. The next two games with Ride 2 and NHL 08 were very different and the same in the exact same way, where they were very different games than what I'm used to playing, but they had the same issue. I had to get used to the mechanics of that particular sport to get better at it, because I'm so used to racing games with cars or sports games as far as maybe basketball and football, and then I jump into NHL, which is hockey, completely different mechanics, or Ride 2 with a motorcycle, which is completely different. I had fun with these games, but learning to get used to those things, learning how the bike turns, learning how it accelerates, learning how it takes the corners, with the NHL, learning how to basically take control of of skating mechanics and just the overall gameplay, and just learning the strategies on playing, and it was just a very different feel. Both of these games I would have to give a borrow. Next up is Puzzle and Party, and surprisingly I had a lot of fun with these. I don't have a huge amount of these kind of games, so I did have to go buy a few more, but I had a blast with them. They were Untitled Goose Game for the PS4, Family Game Night for the PS2, Columns for the Genesis, and Bejeweled 3 for the PS3, along with Hasbro Family Fun Pack for the PS4. I had a blast with all of these. I would honestly just right now just put buy on every single one. You can't go wrong with a good party game. Untitled Goose Game, hilarious. I love the goose in the game. I just ran around the whole time honking and completing little quest off the paper, and just watching the little check marks add up, and it was fun. I had a blast with it. If you can find it for a good deal, I highly recommend buying it. For Family Game Night and Hasbro Family Fun Pack for the PS2 and PS4, those games are really fun just to jump back into some of the Hasbro style games. You can't really go wrong if you've played the board game. You'll have fun playing these games. They're identical to it, and they're just a blast to play with friends and family. So I highly recommend getting at least one of the Hasbro games, whether it's on any system, and having that game is like a good backup where if you want to play a game with friends and family, you have it there. Like I said, if you played the board games, you'll do perfectly fine. What I found interesting, and I didn't notice this until I actually put this list together and I played through some of the games, was how I put Columns and Bejeweled on here, and seeing the similarities and basically where it started and what we have now with Bejeweled. It was cool to go back and play something on the Genesis and then play it again on the PS3 on basically a newer version of it. All the mechanics are the same, and what I love about those games is how addicting they can be and how easy they are for just anyone to pick up. If you can match 3 blocks, awesome, you just mastered the game. But I do recommend all these games on this list, and I put them as all buys. Action adventure games to me are just a classic, timeless kind of game to just jump in, have a good story for about, I don't know, maybe dozen to a couple dozen hours, and really enjoy it. And I love those kind of games. And the same can be said for the 5 that I picked for this. We have Lego Marvel Avengers for the PS4, Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS5, Guardians of the Galaxy for the PS5, Wargroove for the PS4, and Brave for the PS3. It's really hard to mess up a good Lego game, and Lego Marvel Avengers is a fantastic game to jump into and play. In fact, it has something to do with my challenge for next year that I will get into a little bit later, but it is a huge buy for me. I love Lego, I love Marvel. Seeing them both together in a game with a huge amount of characters that you can get into, a lot of secrets. The playability is through the roof with this game, and anyone can just pick it up and play. Doesn't matter the age or the type of person, so definite buy. Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS5. As much as I loved the first Marvel Spider-Man game, Morales was not 100% up there to me. I mean, it's a much shorter game. It's more like a DLC than anything else. I'm going to go ahead and give it a borrow just because I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same. And the reason being is there are 2 different Spider-Man. Miles Morales was just learning his powers. He was just getting into it. So a lot of it, like how he was swinging, how he reacts to things, it's very, I guess, newbie. It's a guy who is brand new to these powers, just learning them, and he's not very elegant with how he moves. Whereas Spider-Man in the original Spider-Man game for the PS4 and then remastered later on, it was very fluid. It was a much easier game for me to grasp and enjoy, and I actually had more fun with that one with the powers that Peter Parker would get rather than what Miles Morales had. I actually, going through the game, there were a number of powers where I didn't end up using them at all, which is contradictory to what I did with Spider-Man. So this one is a borrow. Guardians of the Galaxy really surprised me because the game didn't receive well with people, and I picked the collector's edition up for like $30, and it was brand new. Not a bad game, in all honesty. The story is there. There's a huge story to the game. The only thing I didn't like was some of the bonus stuff you got with it. You got a little art book, but the little art book was taken from the actual art book, so you got like basically a little sampler. And the same thing with the music, where instead of getting the soundtrack to the game, which that's what the collector's edition made it seem like, you would get a soundtrack of the Star-Lord band from the game, and you would only get like maybe a dozen songs at tops. That part wasn't there, but as far as the game goes, the game wasn't bad, and I kind of hope they come out with a second one. That's just my take on it though. So this one, to me at least, is a buy. These next two games, Wargroove for the PS4 and Brave for the PS3, were huge hidden gems to me. Brave was a fantastic game to play. It's short, it's not hard, it's easy to 100% it if you're looking for achievements or trophies. Just a really fun game to play, and it's a Disney game based on Brave, and I love the movie Brave, so it was nice to play this one. And it's cool that it didn't stick so strong to the movie and kind of went its own way, and that's what I liked about it. So that one is a definite buy. And Wargroove is the exact same, being a game that I was not expecting, and to be a hidden gem, it was really nice to see that. Being that it's more of a adventure, I guess, a turn-based strategy game as well. Like, it hits a lot of different genres, and the game itself is really fun. The characters are enjoyable, and it's a really interesting story to go through. And I actually want to go back and replay it again because there are different endings to it as well. So this one is a definite buy for me. Next up is indie games, and this one was actually supposed to be horror games, but towards the end of the year, I haven't played any of the horror games, and they were all packed away. So I had to go and make a last-minute change to some of the indie games that I have not touched or played yet, and some of these are really fun. A couple of these games I wasn't actually able to complete, unfortunately, because of the time restraint towards the end of the year, but they're still good nonetheless. The games are Abyss Odyssey for the PC, Enter the Gungeon for the PC, Raccoon for the PC, Spiritfarer for the PS4, and Vampire Survivors for the PC. The two that I was not able to complete were Raccoon for the PC and Spiritfarer for the PS4. Both of those games, they're going to be tough to get through. They are excellent games, and I highly, highly recommend them. Everything about the game is fantastic, whether it's the artwork, the story, the character development, the music, which I actually have the soundtrack for Raccoon myself, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. And what I love about these games and why they're going to be so hard to play is because they are a colossal gut punch to your feelings, especially Raccoon. When you are a child living in a hospital and basically have to help people come to closure. That is so touching of a game to play, and I cannot recommend it enough. That is a definite buy. And the same thing goes for Spiritfarer. It's basically the exact same thing, except for being a kid, you're sailing on a boat, being the basically guide to these spirits which you've known before. They were friends, family, and other random strangers that you meet along the way. And both of these games together they hit the feels real hard. And I could not say enough good things about them. And they're both a buy. Vampire Survivors was an awesome $5 purchase, and the fact that it's still $5 blows my mind. This game
easily put over 40 hours into, and I know people who have put hundreds of hours into this game. There is so much to unlock. There's so much playability. The soundtrack is amazing. The gameplay mechanics themselves are just so much fun, and it's an easy game to get into. You're going to die a ton, but that's the point of the game, and it makes it worth it with all the rewards that you can get playing all the levels. So Vampire Survivors to me is also a buy. Enter the Gungeon is a fun game, and we actually did a one and done with myself and Shrimp or Mitchell, and we had a lot of fun playing it. To me, though, it's not exactly a game that really caught my attention and keeps me in, so it's going to be a borrow. And then Abyss Odyssey is unfortunately actually going to be a pass, and the reason for that is because it had the potential of being a really fun game. It's a side scroller. You're running, slashing, fighting, the jumping, the mechanics are all there, but the game doesn't come across as polished or finished, and that's where the negative comes in. There's not much of it to begin with, but it's enough just to offset the good stuff in a way. The mechanics of the characters when they're moving or jumping doesn't feel fluid. It doesn't feel polished, like I said before. And the same thing goes for just the voice acting. Some of the voices in it just sound off. They sound like they're recording it in a booth, and there's really no feeling behind these characters. So there's really no getting attached to much in the game. The soundtrack isn't bad. The story isn't bad. The overall mechanics of the game aren't horrible. They just need to be flushed out and polished, and I don't see that ever happening, unfortunately, so to me the game is a pass. And last but not least, we have platformer/arcade. The games don't have to exactly be old school, but they have to give that old school feeling of a good platformer or arcade, something you would actually play in, say, a bowling alley or an arcade that you would go to. As long as they had that feel, I loved them. Those are games that I grew up with as a kid, from the NES and the Sega Genesis and onward, and I wanted to revisit that kind of thing. So these games were Gauntlet Legends for the PlayStation, Mortal Kombat 11 for the PS5, Sonic Mania for the PS4, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid for the PS4, and Dragon Ball Z Budokai for the PS3. I am a huge colossal fan of the Gauntlet series. Love them all. Can't go wrong with it. It's a fun game just to sit, hack and slash with your friends with, and you can't go wrong with it. So if you want a game where you're just button mashing the crap out of things, taking out enemies, and having a good time, highly recommend Gauntlet Legends. That's a buy. Mortal Kombat 11 is a fantastic addition to the series of the Mortal Kombat line. I had a lot of fun with it. It felt like playing the older games as well, just with the newer graphical interface. If you played fighting games and you enjoy them, Mortal Kombat is there, and it has a pretty good storyline along with a decent soundtrack. So I definitely got to recommend it as a buy. Sonic Mania is a buy, and it's a huge fan favorite for a reason. It goes back to what we fell in love with early on in the early days of Sonic with the Sega Genesis. The 2D atmosphere, the quickness of Sonic and all the other characters, and just the overall feel take you back, and it's a fun game to play. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid on the PS4 is a little bit different though, where all these games are games that I would highly recommend. This game, not so much. I have to put the game at a pass, and it's hard for me to say that because I thoroughly enjoyed a good fighting game with the Power Rangers. It just felt very unpolished, like the game wasn't tested. But the battles felt like just repeating things over and over again. It was very tedious. The game was very broken with the mechanics. It's just not a very fun game to play, to pick up for a long period of time. So, unfortunately, it's a pass. And then for Dragon Ball Z Budokai, the reason I put that one on here is because of the fighting mechanics in the game. Obviously, for a lot of arcade games, you're going to be fighting. And that's kind of what this game brings into it. And I had a blast with it. I can honestly say I got hooked, and it was fun to be hooked in an older game like that, and to relive all those stories that we grew up with Dragon Ball, and all the character arcs, and it was just a blast to go through and play. So I definitely have to put this one as a buy, and if you can find them for a decent price, definitely snap them up as quick as you can, because they go up in value, and there's a reason for it. They are just really fun, good games.
And that is going to do it for the 22 challenge. The 23 challenge, on the other hand, is kind of a fun one. I'm leaving it open-ended. I'm not putting a designated number on this to how many I get done, and there's a reason for it. It's actually two-parters. The first part is actually 100%ing some games, like that Marvel Superheroes game I listed. That is on the list. The second part of this challenge is I emailed and sent letters to some friends to get their input on games that they think I should play in my life that I have not touched. Either I have the game, have not played it, or I just don't own it altogether. So I got a whole bunch of those games for my friends. I'm going to go through the list. I'm going to get a bunch of them set aside that I want to play, and that's what I'm going to do this year. I'm not putting a number on either one of these parts of the challenge just because I kind of want to leave it open-ended for how many I can get done. I know for a fact I'm going to have a lot of stuff coming up this year with a new home. So taking that into account, I can't really designate, say, we'll get 40 or get 50 done, but I don't want to take it easy on it as well. I want to get like north of 20 finished, but as long as I do that, I'll be happy. And as far as completing the games 100%, I at least want to do 3 to 5. Those games can definitely take a long time, especially the Lego games. So I don't want to overdo it with myself, but I also don't want to take it easy. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any challenges that you're doing this year, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll make sure to get to them. Until then, take care and peace out.